Welcome to Dolby Atmos, object-based audio mixing for linear VR, presented by Dolby. Please welcome your speakers, Tim Gedemer, Miles Perkins, and Joel Susal.
Hi, welcome everyone. My name is Joel Susal. I'm the Director of Virtual and Augmented Reality at Dolby Labs. It's my pleasure to have two friends and partners here who I'll ask to actually introduce themselves. So, Miles, you want to go first?
Yes, Miles Perkins, also a closet audio fight, but I'm the VP of Marketing Communications for Jaunt.
Tim Gedemer, owner of Source Sound here in Los Angeles. We do creative audio and use Atmos all the time.
Cool. So I think the description of this panel, we talk about realism, and I don't think we invented a word, but we talk about this notion of hyper-realism. So the first question I wanted to ask both of you is, what does realism and eventually what does hyper-realism mean in virtual reality?
That's how I like it.
All right.
It's interesting because virtual reality spans a similar arc of information that we're trying to impart on the viewer as traditional media. For example, we can have situations where we really do want people to know exactly what it sounded like in that particular instance, in that particular space, with that particular camera, what was happening at that camera position. That is one thing that we do all the time, and documentaries do it well. Gritty documentaries who aren't going through heavy post-production audio work after they're shot. And so what happens is we have two different kinds of experiences. We have the kind of experience that we want to hear what it is that was happening on the set or in that experience at that moment. And then we have this other experience of, do we want the viewer to experience something else other than what this thing was that was happening at that moment? So that's a creative decision that has to happen at some point along the way. Do we really want a reality, an accurate reality depiction of this experience, or are we looking for something that is something other than that? And if the minute that you say it's something other than that, there are whole gradients of storytelling to happen over here in that arena. So you can decide to do a somewhat realistic depiction of what that experience was, but it's different in the sense that we didn't just take the sound that was recorded on the set and turn it over and have the viewer listen to it. We manipulated it on the way to that, and we decided to make that person louder and this person softer, or change the equalization, or add a little background. I mean, as soon as you start doing these things, then you've got an altered reality. But the perception of that for the viewer it's still reality-based. And then you can carry that further and further until you find yourself in something that's completely not reality at all. And so somewhere in that trajectory, hyper-realism exists, where I would say it's where you find yourself on your way to departing from reality, but it's that moment where you still are in the arena where people would perceive that as reality before you start moving to non-reality. It's like, oh, clearly, yeah, we don't have elephants in the middle of Los Angeles Street. Okay, we have definitely departed from reality here. So reality versus hyper-reality to me is a difference between what it sounds like at that, exactly what it sounded like when it was recorded, but before it starts turning into something that's completely surreal.
Do you find that your clients are asking for hyper-reality, like when they present to you, here's the audio that we captured on set,
Yeah.
Tim, do your magic?
That's what they come to us for.
Right.
If they don't want that, they don't come to us. So we don't hear about those projects.
Okay.
right? So yeah, that's what we do really well. We do all those other gradients of creative audio work.
And I'm going to come at it from a different angle also, though. Just us as human beings, there's some things that we're playing as we're going into VR about being a hyper-real. What we're doing is we're kind of feeding the mind. We're both feeding the frontal cortex and we're also feeding the base of our brain. So there are some things that you can do with sound. So we're very, sound is the first thing that comes at us anytime we're kind of looking out. It's what leads us. It's the thing that makes me realize that I need to look over here because something is going to eat me or something is chasing me, or it's always fear-based. But that's kind of what leads us to kind of pay attention to what's going on. And I think that ability to have that kind of hyper-real, to be able to introduce more to the mind, to allow the mind to understand, why is it in here? Why do I have the headset on? I have it on because this is a scary thing, or because this is coming at me. I mean, but the other component of that is also having organic sounds, I think, is very important also. Things that deep down in your mind you can grab onto in saying that, I recognize that sound. Not sure exactly what it is, but it's real and I need to pay attention to what it is. So those kind of things I think really enhance what's going on in a VR experience, and kind of furthermore, more so than even in traditional media. Because in a VR experience, it's all about someone being mindful and paying attention to everything that's going on in a way that we don't do on a normal, I mean, except for kids. I mean, kids do that. They pay attention to everything, but we don't do that on a normal day.
Yeah. What we've seen, with inaccurate audio or just a non-immersive audio versus an immersive audio experience, is that oftentimes someone will be watching a video and they'll hear something that's supposed to be important, but because they can't localize it, they'll just kind of ignore it. Or if they realize that it's important but can't localize it, then they go searching. And if they're searching, then they're distracted. Then they're not it's not feeding, I guess it's probably the base part of the cortex, which is that I heard that sound over there and I have to react to that thing over there,
right,
as opposed to, I better go search for that thing that's about to go eat me.
Yeah.
Cool. So I wanted to ask both of you, what are some of the challenges in creating VR content? And I guess, Tim, I would ask you about what are the practical and creative challenges, and Miles, I would ask you about practical and distribution challenges. Like, how does this actually happen, and how do you do what you're an expert in VR?
That's a big question. For sure, one of the big challenges that we've had is that there's no real, or at least there hasn't been, any real pipeline from start to finish, as in our traditional media clients. Putting things online, putting things in media in theaters, putting media on television. That's all so well put together as far as a point-to-point distribution network of every single item that needs to be put in place, has been in place and has been in place for a long time. And so it's very reliable, it's very stable. We ply our trade in this arena every day. And so when you go to VR and you see that of the 12 points of things that need to happen between the production take one and distribution are 1,200 things. And you only have every third one that's actually connected. You have to fill in those gaps wherever they are, and we have our challenges on the audio side to fill those gaps and solve problems, jump over hurdles, invent things that don't exist, because we need to get from point A to B from B to C, and there's nothing to go from B to C, so we've got to figure out something to do. So that's how it's been for the last couple of years. Technology like Dolby Atmos has helped us connect some of those dots along the way. So for sure, that's one of our big challenges.
And I think one of our focuses at Jaunt is really in trying to figure out how we can make that end-to-end solution. How can we go from shooting, which is something that should be you know, there are some intricacies of shooting in VR for sure, in how you approach it. But how can you go from that all the way through to publishing in a way that, first of all, as you say, rely on tools that currently exist and people are familiar with, but also that just simply lowers that barrier, that technical barrier to entry. Because if you have a creative that is paying such close attention to the technical problems, whether we're talking about technical problems of the execution of it or technical problems in problems that they see, all of a sudden they're distracted from what their real talent is, which their real talent is being creative, is telling a story, is giving the audience something that they've never seen before, never thought of before. As soon as they're having to think about other things, the mind share is gone. And so what we're really trying to focus on is how can we not only from the creator lower that barrier to entry, but also for the consumer. I mean, like for the consumer, it's like, how do I know how to go and have a Dolby Atmos experience in VR? Or how do I know how to get your piece of content and go directly there? I mean, I joke about, you know, getting my mom in and going, okay, what do you see now? Okay, now you have to scroll down. No, scrolling is when you go, you know, and it's like, you know, and I'm trying to do it from memory. It's just, that's impossible. So all of those barriers to entry need to be reduced so that we can really start to have the creative be able to have that experience. And I'll go kind of one step further. The thing that we really like about Dolby Atmos is right now it's one of the only things that provides consistency across all of the platforms. We want to be on all platforms, but what is going to give us a visual and an audio consistency so that the creator knows from this experience to that experience that the audience is going to hear the same thing. That's important.
Tim, is that something that you are concerned with? Like, I can imagine when you're creating content and you've got kind of, whether it's cinematic or virtual or cinematic VR, you have kind of a wide array of tools in front of you, a well set up PC, and you're crafting something that's ultimately going to be consumed on who knows what, whether it's a iOS device on cardboard, or an Oculus, or a Vive, or an Android device, or a Samsung device in a Gear VR. How concerned are you about knowing exactly what the consumer is ultimately going to hear?
Well, I mean, we have to be 1,000% concerned because our clients are concerned. That's what drives us to, you know, we have quality control, right? I mean, all the way down the line. Our clients force it on us in whatever way they know how. They communicate to us saying it has to be this way, and they, you know, spend lots and lots of money to make sure it's just like that, right? So it's a very frustrating experience for our clients to make it just like that, for them to shell out all the money, and then go over here and have an experience that's dissatisfying to them. They don't like that. They don't like that. And, you know, we need to be able to provide them with an insurance policy. That's one of the things that we do. One of the little secrets about people in audio, we provide our clients with an insurance policy that says, no matter what we do, from here to here to here to here, it will all sound the same. And you will have the same experience, whether you're listening in the theater, whether you're hearing this online, whether this is on YouTube, whether this is going to be in VR, you know, and we have to make different mixes for these different purposes. They don't sound perfect just by pressing a button. We have to make an effort to say this mix is special for this reason. It has this specification, and we need to meet that specification. And we move to this one. Some of them are plug and play. Atmos makes that a lot easier for us. We can make an Atmos mix, and then we can do a 5.1, and we can do a 7.1 from that. We can do a stereo from that. We can, if we wanted to, we could do a mono. Thank God no one's asking for monos anymore.
Right.
But anyway, the point there is that, yes, it's super, super important, not only from our standpoint, because, you know, we want our work to be properly represented in the world, but even more than that, our clients are on top of us every day. If they go to the theater, or they go into a VR environment, and they see and hear something that's not to their liking, that's not good for us. Yeah.
Miles, I wanted to ask, is there anything that you can share now that you've launched the service, I think, very widely? what's resonating with people? Like what are people excited to view again and again? And what have you started to learn about usage patterns in VR?
I wanted to set the table because one thing that I always internally I say is people want to jump to, oh, this works, so let's just do this. And we are definitely still at maybe not even at day zero. I mean, we're really, we're like Lumiere brothers over here, you know what I mean? So I do want to set the table with that because I do think that something is going to happen Pokemon Go style, where all of a sudden there's going to be something that you just didn't realize, and it just completely takes over the consciousness of our entire community. But that said, action adventure is one of the number one. People like going other places that they can't go. So we're definitely seeing people go and not only have an interesting thing about this is they'll not watch it just once, but they'll watch it over and over and over again. Yeah. Another thing that we're finding, kind of the second is, I call it the kind of pop culture shorts. Those snackable kind of shorter pieces that are kind of get you excited and fun, you know, Brandon Latch kind of stuff. Is something that, you know, we did with Lily Singh, and those things are pick up. I think the next one after that is music. People are really getting into the music. I think we're just scratching the surface in what that is, in how we're going to tie that in with tours, how we're going to tie that in also, for example, the Paul McCartney thing that we worked with you guys also on, those are liner notes. You know what I mean? They're the old school liner notes that you opened up an album and you read everything you could about, you know, and yet it's just Paul McCartney giving you the liner notes, which is pretty cool. So starting to do creative things around that. Horror is also really big. Yeah. People love to get scared, not sure why. But one thing that we're also trying to do is we're trying to provide the content creators out there, the community, with tools that help inform them of what is working and what is not working. And so if none of you know, one of the things with Jaunt has been a little bit, I want to be careful about how I said, a little bit of a black box in that we're a startup. We've been very focused on trying to make sure that the tools that we're making work and that they're scalable. Because if you're premature in releasing something, what happens is you're just playing firefighter. That's all you're doing, and you're trying to do that. So be it the camera, trying to get the camera out there so that we could make sure that it's production ready. We got that out there in September, and then finally started to run it with Radiant. We opened up our Jaunt cloud services for people to be able to use who not only use the Jaunt 1 camera, but also are using the Ozo as well. They can use this back in. And then yesterday we announced the publishing platform where people who already have content, it can be animated content as well, which by the way is the 5th one that people watch. Animated content also can be on the platform. But what we're introducing is tools that help the creators understand a little bit. And I would like to play, if I can, this tool that we just rolled out. We'll probably want to bring the volume down a little bit unless you guys all want to do the Harlem Shake.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce Jaunt.
Let's drop the sound a little bit if we can. So what you're looking at right here is a heat map. It's what people are seeing. And it's what everybody who has basically watched this is looking at when something's going on. So we have a pretty good idea that people are looking. That happens to be me in the middle doing my little dance there. And then when it breaks loose, you'll watch everybody starts looking all over the place. And so that's starting to inform the creator, oh, did I capture them? Did they get lost? Who's lost? Who isn't? And from a sound point of view also, someone like Tim can go and look at this and go, hey, did that thing work? When I tried to give them a cue that's over here to the left or to the right, did it work? So this is something that is right now readily available to anybody who's using Jaunt Cloud services. So
this represents how many viewers?
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot of folks.
Thousands?
Yeah.
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 Cool.
And of course we can, I mean, right now that's what we're providing, but we're going to be in a situation where we're going to be able to slice and dice that data. And there's other data also that we're going to be sharing. We really want to share data, but again, I want to preface that by saying we want to put out things that are ready for the people so that we can continue to innovate.
Great. I love
That's
that.
really cool.
That's very cool.
I have a hypothesis. I'll bet that when there's an Atmos video, you'll see tighter heat maps than when using an alternate audio format. But that's something we'll have to look
That
into.
sounds awesome. I'm ready to dig into that data
I'd
set.
love to see that.
Tim, I wanted to ask you specifically about Atmos. I know that you've been using our tools kind of since the beginning.
Yeah.
And what we're showcasing here in our booth is an upcoming version of what's now called the Dolby Atmos VR production suite that starts to introduce some very specific, I would say, per object features,
Okay.
like the ability to turn head tracking on and off on a per object basis, or change the way that binauralization occurs, whether it doesn't occur.
Subwoofer.
Yeah.
I'm ready. Somebody's got to make some headphones that can do it.
I'm curious, do you have an opinion of things that you're capable of doing with Atmos that you're not, that kind of don't pan out, so to speak, in 5.1 or other audio formats?
Well, for sure, 5.1 is easy, and even 7.1. We can't get the same clarity of panning and spatialization.
Yeah.
The granularity of Atmos is really deep compared to any channel-based system. You could even put a 15.1 or a 20.1. It's still not going to be as smooth as Atmos is.
How about compared to B format? Do you find the same thing?
B format is, what I would call an inferior version of what ambisonic, the promise of ambisonic is. And so if you're going to compare Atmos directly to B format, I would say it still has the same effect. B format has the capability of rotating. It has the capability of it certainly doesn't have the capability of switching per object whether something's head tracked or not.
Right.
So that alone is a feature that almost every director I've worked with wants.
Okay.
So I have to just reject ambisonic, outright in those cases because I just can't do it. I can't get that kind of granularity.
And are you seeing the need for, say, head tracking and non-head tracking in?
Oh yeah, absolutely. In fact, we were just working on a project where it's a music video, and we've took all the original tracks and spatialized the tracks, and we took our first crack at what we thought would be a fun and interesting way to do it, and the artist felt great about 70% of it, and then the other 30% he's like, that's a little too much,
Yeah.
A lot of artists are just not used to hearing their music in that way. It takes them time to kind of get their head wrapped around it. So anyway, in a case like this particular artist wanted to hear his voice not really spatialized. He wanted it to kind of just be sitting in the middle and have everything else spatialized around it. So in a case like that, I could not execute that without Atmos.
Got it.
You said something that's funny that we found also is that we did a piece that we had put limited release around Truckin'. It was Grateful Dead. It was mixed by Dennis Wiz Leonard, who is like an old-time Grateful Dead mixer. It was recorded at the Fare Thee Wells concert. And it's striking to be on the stage and have a album quality mix spatialized on a stage. It's because it's just if you've been on a stage, that is not the sound.
That is not the
sound. It's a cacophony of sound on a stage. But to be there and have something that just is to die for in terms of the audio quality, and to also have the experience of being able to select kind of who you're listening to a little bit more, it was unnerving, but awesome.
Yeah.
Just awesome.
Yeah, yeah. We find the same thing. The curated music experience is dynamic. It's super dynamic.
Yeah,
We love it.
it's an experience you've never had before,
Right,
really.
right.
You've never had that experience before.
Tim, I know that you've also done a number of traditional Atmos mixes for games,
Sure.
television, film.
A lot, yeah.
I'm just curious, with that background, how easy or hard was it to transition to the VR flavor of Dolby Atmos?
It took the better part of a couple of hours.
Awesome.
It was really easy,
All
actually.
right.
Yeah, it was really easy. There's a little bit of a different setup, as you know.
Yeah.
A couple little technical things that had to be configured a little differently. But really, anybody who knows Dolby Atmos from theatrical or television world or even the game world, it's a no-brainer. Within a couple of hours, you're up and ready to go in VR, really. I mean, people aren't used to being able to pan below them, so that throws people off a little bit.
Right.
Well, how do I do that? Really? Can I do that? Yeah, you can really do that. But small things like that, it takes about 5 seconds to get used to because it's fun, and you've never been able to do it before, right? So any mixer is just going to be like, yoo-hoo, this is great. Never been able to do that. So yeah, easy.
Cool. Let me just, I'll ask one more question, then we'll run a video, and then we'll open it up to the audience. But I just kind of wanted to go a little bigger and ask, what are you both excited for in VR? Another way of putting it is, what do you think is going to be the watershed moment in VR? Tim, I know, just to steal one thing that you've said in the past is we're all looking for the Jurassic Park of VR that helps us realize, okay, this new technology is really here. I'd love to hear what excites you and what you're looking forward to.
I'll let you hit that first since you had a
Yeah,
global.
there's a couple parts to me. Is I think that finding people to tell their unique story that can make someone. I mean, we keep on calling this empathetic thing. We go to it, and maybe that's not all the way the word. But just so that someone can truly understand someone else's story, like to me, and whether we're talking about that in a story setting, in a music setting, in a action adventures, whatever it is, like to truly really feel that moment that there was actually something that I watched earlier today, that again it made me well up a little bit because it had something to do with, I'm very close to my son, and it was this situation where, this guy is talking to his son, and then at the end, and to me, it was so humanizing. If anybody else hadn't had that experience, they would know at that moment, we are all human beings here. And that guy and that gal and that person with that alternative, to me, way of living, we're all one. That to me is exciting, but we have to find ways, and the watershed moment is when we find ways where this naturally fits into our lives, so that there's some ease of use that I wake up in the morning and just as easy as I would grab my iPad, I would go and I would look at a piece of content because it's shareable or whatever. Those are the things that really, shareability really excites me. Like someone's going to crack that, and that's going to be huge. It's going to be absolutely huge.
Everybody in our neck of the woods, we talk about this amongst ourselves, amongst the VR community, and the thing that keeps coming back to me is that there's a lot of noise out there about people wanting to entertain other people. They want to show people what it's like to be here or to do this, but there's a complexity to a lot of it that I think is not what it is that's going to hit us. I think the watershed moment is going to be so simple. Somebody is going to do something that resonates throughout the entire culture in such a deep way that it can't be avoided. It just can't be avoided. Everybody will have to watch it. They'll watch it multiple times because it gives them this feeling. It's probably going to be something really simple like we follow a piece of someone's life and something happens in that person's life that's just so unbelievably amazing that we all have to experience it and we all have to share in that moment with that person. I think it's going to be something like that.
Yeah.
Can I tag on to that? One piece of data that I didn't share, you guys asked me to pull up some data that is relevant to this also, is we actually find that people on average watch a piece of content 3 times.
Wow.
That's huge. If you know anything about entertainment,
On average.
yeah, that's huge. That's really odd and really huge. And it means that the engagement is that much deeper. So again, this is not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And to your point, there's going to be that moment that, you know, the weather's right, the geopolitical scenarios right, that everything just lines up, that all of us are going to have that urge to go and see that piece of content, and that's going to be it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. What I'd like to do is I'd like to roll one more video. All right, we will do Q&A first.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes.
I have a question about what does the actual output look like for a spatialized mix? Is it like a stereo, multi-channel?
Well, if we're talking about Atmos, the Atmos output is a single file wrapped with a lot of files. So it's about 128 channels of information crammed down into one file that is encoded in a particular way. In the end, in the experience, it's a binaural render of the Atmos experience. It's the only way we can get the 2-channel playback is in the binaural render, but that's at the end. Yeah.
What I can say about like the final output of the Dolby Atmos VR production suite, beyond just having a master file that contains all of your objects and their placement and the metadata of them, is that you get what's called a Dolby Digital Plus file that can be muxed with video and put into an MP4 container. You can also derive other audio formats like 5.1 or B format from the Dolby Atmos VR production suite. The difference between those, the Dolby Digital Plus output and B format or 5.1 is enhanced precision, as well as greater support for the metadata that's associated with each object. So the Dolby solution, you craft and you create content using objects. When you export to a Dolby codec, it preserves those objects as objects. And then when it's played back in a service like Jaunt, it decodes those native objects and renders them with their full precision and their full metadata. And it's that experience that we believe is superior and upon which our business is based.
And the awesome thing is that it can be done on your cell phone.
Right, that's what I was going to ask. So do like all of the current players support Dolby, like the gear, the built-in Oculus video player and stuff like that?
Yeah, so our playback solution, it runs on PC with Oculus and Vive. It runs on iOS with Cardboard or Android with Cardboard, Samsung devices with Gear VR. And again, it's the same consistent experience across all of those playback scenarios. So that, as Tim mentioned, when his client is writing him to make sure that the experience is going to be consistent and favorable on all of those different devices, that's one of the promises that we help fulfill. Yes?
So I noticed the term object-based mixing, and when I hear that I think like Unreal and Wise and game engines. So if it's like a linear piece of content, there's no game engine, what's the object?
When you say what's the object, you're thinking a visual object.
Well, I'm thinking like if this was Unreal and we had a sound emitter and a listener, then the sound emitter would be an object. So that's what I'm thinking of as object-based. That's my background.
It is.
It's like just
Yeah.
a regular piece of linear media. It's not a game engine. Where does the object-based mixing happen?
Where is it happening?
how is object-based applied to just like a linear piece?
So,
You want to get that?
yeah, so our tool set runs on top of a digital audio workstation, Pro Tools. So for every track in Pro Tools, you can instantiate what's called our Panner plugin, and that allows you to turn that track into an object that can have its own trajectory as well as its own metadata in terms of behavior. And what we've all seen, you know, a large volume of game engine-based experiences that are very impactful. But what I think is really compelling about the linear use case is that it really, number one, is that it doesn't require a large download. So it's something that practically can be done on a mobile device of a real consumer, right? Just to get the Jaunt experience, you just need to download the Jaunt app, and then everything else is streamed. And I think, you know, at this conference, it's filled with early adopters who are willing to endure hundreds of megabytes of download or gigabytes of download. But in order for VR to really pierce the mainstream, you can never underestimate the impatience of a mainstream user. And so one of the key benefits that Atmos provides is that same level of addressability and flexibility that you get in a game engine, but at a low bit rate that can be streamed so it can be enjoyed by a large number of viewers.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yes, over here.
Hey guys, Robert Klug, Streaming Media. I was curious, are you seeing any leaps and bounds in HEVC, H.265 adoption from distribution standpoint to help, you know, lower bit rates for streaming and better experiences? I was just curious what your all take might be, being more on the inside than maybe myself, to know where things might stand.
To answer your question, yes. And I think that when you're starting to deal with file sizes that can be 8K per eye, you know, is where we're going to wind up going, you're going to have to find something that is even much further beyond that. The other part is to have some sort of variable bit rate, so that depending upon what your connectivity is, and it's what you see on Netflix right now, so it'll modulate. And so that's actually something that also we do, and we have our own codec that we've kind of put on top of everything, so that we are modulating that, so that you're getting, depending upon what your connectivity is, we're able to kind of bring down that overhead.
Oh, there's one there and then one there.
I had a question for Joel. In regards to your technology and getting the word out there, not only to consumers, but to content providers as well, what's the biggest pain points in helping educate them on the technology? Because obviously, you know, for Tim and for everyone in here and also Miles, we're familiar with VR, we're familiar with Atmos, but when trying to get it to the masses, what are the pain points in regards to marketing and kind of getting the word out there?
Yeah, I think, thanks for the question. In terms of getting marketing to the masses, I think it's going to be some portion of these watershed moments where someone actually experiences something that they realize that is better in virtual reality. What I would say, you know, what our focus is really in helping the creatives in the space tell the stories that we hope will create those experiences. And I think we're starting to see some of them, like, you know, the McCartney piece, Live and Let Die, that's one of the older pieces, but it's still, I mean, I can see why you're getting multiple views because I've watched that myself like 20 times, and I've shown it to like my family members even more. Sure. And so I think, yeah, I'm not sure I have an answer to, you know, how to articulate to the mainstream other than to show them. And really the challenge for us is to understand what the best creative minds are looking for, and then to equip them with the technology for them to realize that vision. And there's a lot of hit and miss that goes on in that kind of iteration, but we're starting to zero in on a number of different key features. One of them is that ability to turn head tracking on and off. So we're kind of inching towards, we're adding ingredients to the pot.
Right.
And at some point, I think we're going to get to, the critical recipe, if you will. And that's when I think the mainstream will really.
And I'm going to go further, because one thing that I'll take my hat off to Joel is that he remains focused on the content creators. And I'm the guy over here that I'm always saying, yeah, but we can tell, the common users that this is a great brand. And, and I really appreciate that. I mean, I'm going to kind of make a weird analogy. It's kind of like when you find a company that goes and becomes a public company and they care more about the shareholder than they do about the product. Mm-hmm. They don't have this problem. But from my perspective, what I like to do is, first of all, if people go out and even, in a theater, people start to understand what the Dolby brand is. They have understood what these opening things are, because deep down what happens is they have a good experience and they associate with that brand. There's a direct recognition that they have. I'm hoping personally that in the partnership with Dolby is that we can have that same relationship with the consumer. That when a consumer goes and has this experience and they have a good experience, they see that, they see us, they go, you know what, every time I've gone here, that's been a good experience. When I see this combination, that's a good experience. And I think it's just about, for him, getting this tool in the hands of the creators, for us, making sure that the consumer understands that this is a top quality experience.
And one thing I would just add that makes it easier for the mainstream or for consumers to understand the benefit of Dolby Atmos. Jaunt, for example, has enabled an Atmos lobby. So if you have the Jaunt app and you launch it, you'll see right now we're featured as there's a category of Dolby Atmos. You can see every piece of Dolby Atmos that's on the Jaunt service. But for even easier access, there's a direct URL that you can access from your mobile device that has the Jaunt app on it. If you go to jauntVR.com/lobby/Dolby, that's with a capital D, it will take you directly into that experience. So again, there's the ability to not only access Jaunt's entire library of content, but also to go and see what we believe is some of the most compelling audio content available.
Hi, you described an experience of being on a stage where the different musical tracks were spatialized, and you described it as being both awesome as well as unnerving. Can you describe what you mean by unnerving? What was unnerving about?
So I have a double life. I've done music for a long time. And so I've had the experience of being on the stage, and I'm very comfortable on a stage. But to be on a stage and everything in my mind, when I'm in this, it's a long experience also. It's like a 10-minute experience. Being in there, you start to forget and you start to just think that you're on the stage. But for me, there's this thing that's nipping at the back of my mind that's going, how can this sound so good? Yeah. Like, this is just wrong. That, like, this is just butter. It's a kind of, you said it's this hyper-real experience for me that has my juices flowing in a way that they don't normally flow. And to me, it's an interesting feel. It's a different feeling. It's super awesome, but it is different. Because like I said, usually being on stage, it's a cacophony of sound. It is just... I'm a bass player. I like to have hi-hat and keys. I don't want to hear the horn. I don't want to hear all these other people. So my mix compared to what you listen to in the audience is completely different. And so when I'm on the stage and I don't hear that mix, it's weird to me. So
yeah, there you go. Yeah. Good.
Hi, question to Miles. So we talked about mainstream for VR. So at what point do you think it will be mainstream enough that Jaunt can charge consumers for enjoying the content? Because right now, just like most other services, it's a free experience.
That is a really, really good question, and I think one that a lot of people who are way above my pay grade would like the answer to. And actually, everybody wants that answer as well. The one thing I have to say is, say that we tend to be very impatient nowadays. If I want a piece of content, I want it now. If I want I want everything now. And I think we have to recognize the fact that this industry needs to mature. There needs to be a reason to want to have that transaction. I don't know if it's subscription. I don't know if it's TVOD. I mean, I think a lot of things are going in the way of freemium, and then at some point you're upcharged on something for one reason or another. Exactly how it's going to manifest itself, I'm not quite sure, but it will. I think that there are enough people who are interested in trying to find a way to do this that it's going to make sense. And the other thing that is interesting, I don't know if I said this, but more than half of our content is being viewed internationally, which is, if you really understand, you talked about the normal pipeline before. I come from a film background. You know, there are some territories that you know will do well with content, but you don't go there because it's too expensive to try to actually get it in that market. This is a groundbreaking watershed moment where I can release a piece of content right now, and it is in, like, you know, the Ukraine. You know, so that is a different moment, but also that comes with a different economy. So, you know, here we charge more for things than we do, for example, say in China. China, you know, you do microtransactions. So I think there's a lot to figure out and what's going to work, but I think there are going to be enough people that are going to try it. I expect next year you'll start to see some of this stuff happen.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you both. We do have a video just to roll out, but I just want to sincerely thank both of you for this great discussion. It's always fun.
It's fantastic. Are we going to roll a video? We have mono to stereo to quad to 5.1 to 7.1 to Atmos, and then somehow we've got to cram all that down into 2 speakers again.
It's an entirely new technology, an entirely new way to tell stories.
It goes against everything that you know how to do in traditional filmmaking.
The viewer actually becomes the camera.
The independent film community reaps huge benefits from using a technology like Atmos.
This is going to change filmmaking, and it's going to be a major part of our lives.
It's like anything that, like, where you hear something for the first time, and you're just like... Hi, my name is Rose Trochet, and I'm the writer-director of Perspective Chapter 2, The Misdemeanor. It's a story about 2 young men who get into a confrontation with a police officer, and things just spiral out of control.
In this particular piece, we get the chance to experience an event from multiple perspectives. If you don't see all 4 of the chunks, you will not get the full story.
In virtual reality, the screen is wherever the viewer is looking. By creating the Atmos sound field for each individual character, we enabled the viewer to empathize with those characters, to hear their voice in a unique way.
I gotta give my bag.
You didn't take anything?
No, that guy's always chasing us.
For me, it's sort of a social experiment in who really watches the piece in its entirety. Are you compelled because you have the opportunity to see all sides?
You came for me.
Or do you just say, oh, I don't need to bother seeing that because I already know what that is?
I think people have cried watching it or been very emotionally involved. When you're dying and you look up and you see the officer looking down at you.
Put your hands behind the back.
And being able to hear the officer above you, you feel for these characters.
You're like, what the hell? You just shot. What happened?
Can you open your eyes? Ambulance is coming, all right? You just gotta hang in there for me.
When you want to be put in someone's body, that mix and the way that a perspective of sound changes based on where you are, where you turn your head, like, it's elevating the piece exponentially.
Without the sound, you just don't feel you're actually at that location. That is literally the missing link.
Atmos allows for a completely immersive environment to be created and is now being used to direct attention in virtual reality.
You're just watching your brother and a police officer, and you hear a gunshot behind you and you realize your brother's been shot. I mean, that impacts you, and that's certainly more powerful than any traditional medium.
In a traditional mix, the screen is the focus, and everything else is secondary to that experience.
You kind of can't do that with any kind of other mix, you know? So in a way, like, Atmos is like just a gigantic part of like the success of the piece.
Creating a uniformity to the sound and a believability is something that object-based audio allows us to do in a very effective manner.
It makes or breaks, you know, as much as anything else.
Any object can be placed anywhere in that field and allow the director to guide the story using sound.
You have to retrain your brain from how you used to shoot, you know.
Our tools allow the Atmos experience to be downscaled to any Android device or iOS and put that viewer in whatever space they want it to be in.
I mean, how great is that for independent filmmakers to have a tool that can give them that kind of credibility? You got to look for those everywhere.
That's, I think, my favorite thing about doing this mix. If you were talking to me, and I transitioned with my own voice talking, I would go from the resonating voice to like this, to this other. My voice would pan around.
Seeing the look on the director's face as they hear their audio like they shot it on set, but with all of the sparkle of post-production added to it, is a really gratifying experience.
One of the things that sets Dolby apart is that they've committed themselves to actually creating the pipeline to make this work from start to finish.
Thank you.